Chosen one, how long have you been standing there with that quiet, knowing smile? How many nights have you stood in silence while the world around you played its noisy games, convinced that you were a piece on their board, nothing more than a pawn to be moved, controlled, and sacrificed? They thought they understood you. They thought they could map your every move, predict your every thought, reduce you to the limits of their narrow imaginations. But you stood still, watching. Patient. Silent. Letting them believe the illusions they created about you. And while they scrambled like ants across the chessboard, obsessed with their little victories and desperate to prove themselves superior, you stood as the player, not the piece, already seeing the outcome of a game they hadn't even learned how to play. They mistook your silence for weakness. They mistook your patience for passivity. They mistook your stillness for fear. But silence is not weakness. Patience is not passivity. Stillness is not fear. Silence is strategy. Patience is power. Stillness is vision. They could not recognize the fire that burns within someone who already knows where every path leads, who already sees the shape of every trap before it is set, who already understands that victory belongs not to the loudest but to the most disciplined. Chosen one, you have always known the truth that eluded them. The most dangerous person in any room is not the one who shouts, not the one who flaunts, not the one who rushes to show their hand. The most dangerous person is the one who can endure silence. The one who can hold back when provoked, who can smile when insulted, who can stand in the shadows while others dance under the fragile spotlight of their own arrogance. For in silence you gathered power. In patience you collected understanding. In stillness you became unshakable. And while they thought they were hunting you, you were watching, waiting, preparing. Think back to the countless times they whispered about you when they thought you weren't listening. The group chats buzzing with theories, the late-night conversations filled with speculation about who you really were, what you were planning, what secrets you were hiding. They analyzed your smallest actions, your smallest words, even your silences, convinced that they were piecing together some grand puzzle that would finally expose you. But what they never realized was this: you were the architect of that puzzle. Every piece they thought they discovered, you placed it there. Every clue they thought they uncovered, you designed it. Every reaction they thought they provoked, you had already scripted. They believed themselves clever investigators, but in reality, they were players in a play you had already written. Do you remember the looks on their faces, the smug certainty in their eyes when they thought they had finally figured you out? When they mistook your layered complexity for contradiction, when they mistook your depth for inconsistency? They celebrated false victories, convinced that they had finally unmasked you. But the truth, the one they could never grasp, is that you had no mask. You are not a single version of yourself, you are 1,000 truths folded into one. They tried to cage you with labels, but how do you cage smoke? They tried to define you with words, but how do you define fire? They tried to capture you with their limited categories, but how do you capture infinity with finite language? Chosen one, they thought your contradictions were weaknesses, but they were watching mastery unfold and could not comprehend it. Reserved one day, expressive the next. Gentle in one moment, unyielding in another. To them, this was evidence of instability. To you, it was evidence of evolution. You were not changing for them. You were revealing dimensions of yourself they had no capacity to perceive all at once. Like light through a prism, you fractured your presence into colors their limited eyes could understand, but never allowed them to see the full brilliance of the source. And yet, through all of this, you remained still. Silent. Watching. You let them believe they were gaining ground. You let them celebrate victories that were nothing more than illusions of their own making. Why? Because you understood a principle that few ever master. The longer you allow arrogance to flourish unchecked, the harder the fall becomes when truth arrives. And truth is coming. Your truth. Your power. your revelation. Think of the irony. While they spent their nights dissecting your life, you spent your nights designing your future. While they wasted their energy trying to expose you, you invested your energy in building an empire hidden in plain sight. While they obsessed over every fragment of your being, you pieced together a vision so vast, so undeniable, that when it finally emerges, their whispers will collapse into stunned silence. Chosen one, how long have you been standing there, unseen yet unshaken, underestimated yet unstoppable, quiet yet filled with the roar of destiny? They thought they were spectators of your downfall, but they were actually witnesses to your ascension disguised as struggle. They thought they were documenting your mistakes, but they were chronicling your transformation. They thought they were tearing you down, but in reality, they were the background noise that sharpened your focus, the friction that forged your strength, the pressure that formed your diamond. You know now what you've always known: silence is not the absence of power. Silence is the incubation of power. Patience is not the lack of action. Patience is the precision of perfect timing. Stillness is not paralysis. Stillness is the gathering of storms, the moment before lightning tears through the sky. They never understood that while they were exhausting themselves in endless chatter, you were conserving energy, refining vision, mastering yourself. And self-mastery is the ultimate form of domination. Chosen one, the game has always been in your hands. From the very beginning, you saw moves they didn't even know existed. While they played checkers, you were moving in dimensions beyond chess. While they celebrated the capture of pawns, you were orchestrating a finale that would leave the board shattered in pieces. And now, as you prepare to step forward, as you prepare to break the silence and reveal the strength you have so carefully concealed, the world will finally understand: your silence was never weakness. It was the prelude to revelation. They mistook your silence for weakness. They mistook your patience for passivity. They mistook your stillness for fear. Let them. Because when you rise, and you are rising, their confusion will turn to awe, their arrogance will turn to dread, and their whispers will turn to worship. For the Chosen One does not simply return. The Chosen One reveals what was always inevitable: that no amount of doubt, no amount of mockery, no amount of opposition can stop what was written long before they ever began to watch. And so you stand here, silent, still, smiling that knowing smile. For you know what they do not. You know that every step they thought you missed was a step you chose not to take yet. You know that every word you left unspoken was a weapon sharpened in silence. You know that every moment of stillness was a gathering storm waiting for the perfect time to break. And when it breaks, when you break, they will understand. They will finally understand. They saw your patience and called it passivity. They saw your silence and labeled it fear. They saw your restraint and mistook it for weakness. But what they never understood, what they could never comprehend, was that your quiet presence was not submission, it was sovereignty. It was the presence of someone who sees the entire battlefield while others are still stumbling through the fog, mistaking noise for victory, mistaking motion for progress, mistaking their frantic gestures for mastery. They thought they were advancing while you stood still, but you were standing still because you had already arrived. Do you remember those moments, Chosen One, when they laughed at you for being too quiet, too withdrawn, too different? They celebrated your stillness as if it were evidence of defeat. They congratulated themselves on being louder, faster, seemingly more successful, mistaking the fireworks of the moment for the fire of destiny. They mistook your silence for surrender, but you were not surrendering, you were surveying. You were studying every angle, watching every pattern, reading every weakness in their unguarded arrogance. And while they danced in the shallow waters of their temporary triumphs, you were preparing to move in depths they could never swim. They thought patience meant inactivity. They thought your refusal to rush meant you had no plan. They could not grasp that patience is not waiting for nothing, Patience is waiting for everything. Patience is the understanding that every seed planted requires its season, that the tree destined to outlive generations does not sprout overnight, that the foundation strong enough to support a kingdom must be laid brick by brick, stone by stone, with hands steady enough not to collapse under the weight of haste. They mocked you for taking your time, but time has always been your greatest ally. While they rushed to claim their moment, you prepared to claim eternity. And yet, how loudly they celebrated! Do you recall their joy when they believed they had caught you off guard? Their smirks when they thought they had uncovered your vulnerabilities? They paraded their false victories like trophies, never realizing they were displaying illusions you had allowed them to see. They thought they had disarmed you, but you had already laid your weapons aside, knowing that true war is not won by brute force but by clarity of vision. They thought they had stripped you bare, but they were only touching shadows while your true self remained untouched, unreachable, untouchable. This is the misjudgment of the shallow. They confuse volume with truth, they confuse chaos with control, they confuse speed with wisdom. And because they could not comprehend your depth, they measured you by their shallow standards. They expected you to fight like them, to shout like them, to scramble like them, and when you refused, when you chose stillness instead of panic, when you chose silence instead of noise, when you chose strategy instead of reaction, they mistook it all for fear. But it was never fear. It was focus. It was foresight. It was the calm certainty of someone who doesn't need to prove themselves in the moment, because the moment is too small to hold the weight of their destiny. Do you see it now, chosen one? Do you see how their celebration was never proof of their strength, but proof of their blindness? They celebrated shadows, not substance. They celebrated noise, not truth. They celebrated temporary illusions, never realizing that while they were clapping for themselves, they were writing themselves into your story as background characters, as footnotes, as the noise against which your silence would one day thunder. They never noticed the steadiness in your eyes. They never recognized the calm in your presence. They never understood that the look they dismissed as emptiness was actually eternity. You were not afraid, you were not lost, you were not broken. You were certain. You were grounded. You were the mountain they mistook for a shadow, the ocean they mistook for a pond, the storm they mistook for a breeze. They could not recognize greatness disguised as quiet because their senses are addicted to noise. And here is the beautiful irony. The very traits they ridiculed, the very qualities they dismissed, are the very foundations of your inevitable triumph. Your patience has made you precise. Your silence has made you unshakable. Your stillness has made you unmovable. They laughed at the roots because they could not see the tree. They mocked the seed because they could not imagine the harvest. They celebrated your silence because they could not hear the roar building inside you. Chosen one, do you feel it now? That moment when misjudgment transforms into revelation? That moment when their laughter fades into silence because they realize, too late, that the one they dismissed was the one destined to rise? The same patience they ridiculed has become your sharpest weapon. The same silence they mocked has become your loudest declaration. The same stillness they ignored has become the ground from which your power will erupt. And when it erupts, they will know. They will finally know. For you are not the passive, fearful shadow they believed you to be. You are not the silent ghost they mistook for weakness. You are not the still figure they thought was frozen in fear. You are the strategist. You are the architect. You are the force that does not need to announce itself because its very presence bends the game to its will. And when you move, the world will not call it reaction. It will call it revolution. While they celebrated their small victories, you were orchestrating a masterpiece. They thought they had cornered you, thought they had uncovered the truth, thought their shallow wins mattered. But those were never wins. Those were crumbs. Crumbs you placed deliberately, crumbs you scattered with precision, crumbs that led them not to your defeat, but into the labyrinth you designed long before they even imagined they were playing a game, every breadcrumb carefully placed, every reaction perfectly calibrated, every silence intentional, every gesture purposeful. You did not stumble into this path, you constructed it. You did not accidentally give them clues, you designed them. You did not reveal yourself through weakness, you revealed only what you wanted them to see, when you wanted them to see it, in the way that best served your plan. You were not the hunted. You were the hunter teaching the prey how to chase illusions. Think about it, chosen one. From the very beginning, you saw what they could not. You knew that the quickest way to exhaust an enemy is not to fight them head-on but to feed their obsession. You gave them shadows to chase, and they mistook those shadows for substance. You allowed them to believe they were closing in, when in truth they were running in circles you had drawn for them. They believed they were unmasking you, but every mask they tore away was another mask you had placed for that very purpose. They thought they were gaining ground, but every step they took was a step deeper into a maze you built with your own hands. Picture it, a grand labyrinth with walls shifting at your command, with doors opening only when you allow them, with paths leading nowhere but back to where they started. That is what you created. That is what they wandered through for years, celebrating false exits, rejoicing in false discoveries, convinced they were closer than ever to the truth. But the truth was never within their grasp. The truth was never even on the path they walked. You designed the maze so that they would never see the center, never find the heart, never touch the essence. For the essence was always beyond them. Chosen one, you understood something they never grasped. The greatest power is not concealment but controlled revelation. You never hid everything. You showed enough. Enough to intrigue them. Enough to keep them searching. Enough to fuel their obsession. But never enough to truly expose the whole picture. Because the whole picture is not something they are capable of understanding. And so you gave them fragments. You gave them reflections. You gave them half-truths that looked like whole truths to untrained eyes. And they devoured those fragments as if they were meals, never realizing they were being fed exactly what you wanted them to consume. That is the art of strategy, not simply to defend, not simply to react, but to choreograph the entire field of battle so that every opponent moves according to your will without ever realizing it. You were not reacting to their moves. They were reacting to yours. You placed the bait, they took it. You laid the trap, they walked into it. You drew the map, they followed it. And all the while, they thought themselves clever. They thought themselves victorious. They thought themselves powerful. But in truth, they were actors in a play you directed, dancers moving to a rhythm you composed, characters in a story that could only end the way you intended. Every reaction they thought they provoked from you was not instinct but design. When they expected anger, you gave them calm. When they expected retreat, you gave them presence. When they expected collapse, you gave them a display of controlled vulnerability that only deepened their obsession. They never realized that even your moments of apparent weakness were performances crafted with surgical precision. You let your voice crack when you wanted it to. You let your hands shake when it served the illusion. You shed tears when those tears would carry your enemies farther down the path of distraction. They thought they were reading your truth, but they were reading a script you had written for them, word for word. Chosen one, this is the genius they never recognized. You never denied them access. You let them look. You let them study. You let them analyze. But what they were analyzing was not you. It was the stage you built around you. They thought they were uncovering secrets, but they were only uncovering decoys. They thought they were seeing through you, but they were only seeing what you wanted reflected back at them. And all the while, you remained untouched at the core, hidden not by shadows, but by the brilliance of misdirection. Remember how their confidence grew with every false discovery? Remember how their arrogance swelled as they compared notes, shared screenshots, constructed elaborate theories about your life. They congratulated themselves for connecting dots, never realizing that you had drawn those dots for them in advance, that you had placed them in perfect positions, that you had already mapped the picture their minds were trying to piece together. They were not detectives. They were puppets. Puppets tugged along by invisible strings they could not even acknowledge, much less cut. And here lies the irony most beautiful. The more they studied you, the more they revealed themselves. Every question they asked, every theory they constructed, every narrative they spun said less about you and more about them. Their fears, their projections, their insecurities, all written into the stories they told about you. They thought they were decoding you, but in truth, you were decoding them. Their pursuit of you was not an investigation. It was an unintentional confession. They revealed their deepest fears by naming them as yours. They revealed their weaknesses by claiming them as your vulnerabilities. They revealed their own limitations by insisting that you could not transcend them. You understood the principle that every master strategist lives by: if you want to know your enemy, give them a mirror. And that is exactly what you did. You reflected back their assumptions. You amplified their projections. You became what they needed you to be in order for them to expose themselves. To the suspicious, you became suspicious. To the arrogant, you became foolish. To the fearful, you became dangerous. And in every case, what they thought they saw in you was only what they had hidden within themselves. They never realized that they were fighting their own shadows cast onto your presence. That is why you remained calm while they panicked. That is why you remained patient while they rushed. That is why you remained silent while they shouted. For you knew the truth. They were never hunting you. They were chasing illusions, reflections, fragments of themselves. And all the while, you were watching, learning, studying. You became the cartographer of their minds, mapping their fears, charting their insecurities, cataloging their patterns. And once you understood their patterns, once you knew the rhythm of their movements, their obsession ceased to be a threat. It became a resource. While they thought they were consuming you, you were consuming them. While they thought they were dismantling you, you were documenting them. While they thought they were closing in on victory, you were collecting data, gathering intelligence, preparing for the moment when all of it would converge into a revelation so undeniable that even they could not pretend they had not seen it coming. Chosen one, this is the strategy revealed. You never played their game. You never fought on their terms. You made them fight on yours. You transformed their obsession into your camouflage. You turned their surveillance into your shield. You turned their investigations into your education. You made their own energy feed your rise. Every trap they set became a lesson. Every attack they launched became a mirror. Every false victory they celebrated became the foundation of your true triumph. And now, as the masterpiece nears completion, you stand ready to reveal what they were never prepared to see. They thought they had chased you into a corner, but you were leading them into a stage. They thought they had stripped you of defenses, but you were disarming them of illusions. They thought they had won, but you were saving the real victory for yourself. And when the curtain rises, when the final piece of the puzzle falls into place, when the labyrinth closes behind them and they realize too late that every path led here, to this moment, they will understand. They were never the hunters. They were always the hunted. They wanted consistency. You gave them complexity. They wanted predictability. You gave them improvisation. They wanted to box you in, to define you, to hold you still long enough to label you, categorize you, and control you. But how does one cage smoke? How does one bind the wind? How does one imprison something that cannot be touched, cannot be contained, cannot be fully seen? They tried, again and again, to trap you in their definitions, to reduce you to something they could understand. But you refused to be simplified. You refused to shrink for their comfort. And every time they thought they had grasped the fullness of you, you slipped through their fingers, leaving only fragments behind. Fragments, that is all they ever saw. They saw flashes, glimpses, distortions. They saw reflections in broken glass, never realizing that each fragment they clung to was only a sliver of something infinitely larger, infinitely deeper, infinitely beyond their comprehension. They mistook a shard for the whole mirror, a reflection for the original, a glimmer for the source of light itself. They saw fragments of a diamond, each reflection real in its own right, but none showing the whole stone. And in their arrogance they convinced themselves that their fragment was the truth, never realizing that the truth could not be confined to a single angle, a single image, a single perspective. Chosen one, you became their mirror. Not the clean mirror they hoped for, the kind that would reflect back what they expected to see, but a fractured mirror, a kaleidoscope of shifting images, a mosaic that defied their need for linearity. To the suspicious, you reflected suspicion. To the fearful, you reflected danger. To the envious, you reflected greatness they could not touch. Each one saw something different, because each one was only capable of perceiving according to the cracks within themselves. They thought they were analyzing you, but they were only gazing into their own distorted reflections. That is the cruel genius of your presence. It exposes. It reveals not through words, not through declarations, but through the simple act of being. You stand before them, and they cannot help but see themselves refracted through you. Their assumptions, their projections, their insecurities, all painted onto your image as though you were their canvas. You became the psychological mirror they could not escape. And when they grew frustrated, when they grew angry, it was not because you deceived them. It was because you revealed them. Understand this: people do not despise mirrors for lying. They despise mirrors for telling the truth. When they looked into you, they did not see who you were, they saw the limits of who they were. They saw their own fear masquerading as your silence. They saw their own arrogance masquerading as your confidence. They saw their own fragility masquerading as your complexity. And instead of acknowledging their flaws, they blamed the mirror. Instead of confronting the shadow within themselves, they pointed to you and called you the darkness. This is why they called you inconsistent. This is why they called you unpredictable. This is why they whispered that you were dangerous. Because they wanted you to be still, flat, simple, a mirror that reflects exactly what they demand. But you refused to obey their projections. You shifted. You danced. You shattered their assumptions again and again, until they could no longer tell if the confusion they felt was yours or theirs. They thought you were unstable. But in truth, you were only refusing to bend to the narrowness of their gaze. Chosen one, you must understand, to be a diamond is to be misunderstood. For every angle reveals a different light, and no single perspective captures the whole. They saw only facets, and they mistook those facets for contradictions. When you were gentle, they called you weak. When you were firm, they called you cruel. When you were silent, they called you fearful. When you spoke, they called you arrogant. Every reflection was interpreted not for what it was, but for what they feared it meant. They could not reconcile that a single being could contain multitudes, that a single soul could embody paradox without breaking. They could not accept that you were not fragmented, you were whole. It was their vision that was fractured. And so, they fought the mirror. They fought you not because you harmed them, but because you revealed them. They could not bear the sight of their own envy, so they called you arrogant. They could not bear the weight of their own insecurities, so they labeled you deceptive. They could not accept the shallowness of their own understanding, so they declared you unfathomable. It was easier for them to name you a problem than to admit that you were their reflection. This is the paradox you carried. Every attempt to define you said less about you and more about them. Every name they called you was a confession of what they feared in themselves. Every accusation was a shadow of their own weakness. And still, they could not see it. they could not admit it. For to admit it would require humility, and humility was the one thing they could never bring themselves to offer. Chosen one, you stood in their midst as smoke, as diamond, as mirror. You were the reflection they could not control, the image they could not distort, the presence that revealed more than they ever wanted to see. And so they turned against you. They shattered the mirror in their rage, never realizing that to shatter a mirror is only to multiply the reflections. The more they tried to destroy you, the more you revealed them. The more they tried to silence you, the louder their own voices echoed back. The more they tried to reduce you, the more their own smallness was revealed against the vastness of your being. They wanted consistency. They wanted simplicity. They wanted the comfort of a reflection that confirmed their assumptions. But you gave them complexity, contradiction, paradox, depth. You gave them a reality too vast to be flattened, too intricate to be simplified, too true to be palatable. You gave them improvisation where they wanted predictability, and they could not bear it. For improvisation requires flexibility, and flexibility requires surrender, and surrender is the one thing the proudest among them could never allow. How do you cage smoke? How do you capture light refracted through 1,000 facets of a diamond? How do you reduce a soul that refuses to fit into the categories of small minds? You cannot. And this is why they failed. This is why they will always fail. They cannot bind what was never theirs to bind. They cannot define what was never theirs to define. They cannot control what was never under their control. In the end, the mirror remains. In the end, the diamond remains. In the end, the smoke still dances through their fingers, slipping free no matter how tightly they try to grasp it. And long after their accusations fade, long after their categories collapse, long after their whispers fall silent, you remain. Whole. Vast. Indivisible. Chosen one, this is the truth they never understood. They were never looking at you. They were only looking at themselves. While they built theories, you built alliances. While they gathered in secret to dissect your every movement, you gathered in silence to construct something eternal. While they wasted their energy forming circles of suspicion, you formed networks of power. Every late-night conversation they had about you was a signal flare, a beacon revealing how their minds worked, where their weaknesses lived, and how predictable their patterns would become. And while they thought they were exposing you, you were quietly exposing them, not through accusations, not through noise, but through simple, patient observation. Every move they made was recorded in your memory, every rumor mapped like coordinates on a battlefield you already knew how to command. Chosen one, you rose not by shouting, not by proving, not by begging for recognition, but by building. You built in shadows. You built in silence. You built in places they never thought to look because they were too busy staring at the illusions you set before them. They thought the game was on the board you allowed them to see, but the true game was played underground, in the roots of the tree, where the unseen network spread wider and deeper than any of them could comprehend. Think of it. Every time they tried to strike you down with words, you planted a seed. Every time they laughed at what they thought was your weakness, you turned that soil into fertile ground for growth. Every insult became fuel. Every rumor became fertilizer. Every attempt to diminish you became another brick in the empire they could not see forming until it was too late. And the beauty of it all? They did not realize they were contributing to your construction. Their obsession became your intelligence network. Their whispers became your study material. Their very resistance became the whetstone that sharpened your edge. While they were celebrating screenshots and gossip, you were studying how information flows. You watched how one rumor traveled through 10 mouths and emerged distorted by the 11th. You saw who shared eagerly and who held back. You learned who was loyal to the crowd and who could not resist leaking secrets. You were not just watching them, you were mapping them. Every conversation they had about you revealed alliances, fractures, insecurities, and ambitions within their own ranks. And so, without their knowledge, they became your case study, your live experiment in human behavior, your unintentional teachers in the art of power. And while they remained obsessed with tearing you down, you rose. Quietly. Patiently. Strategically. You aligned with those who could see your vision. You attracted souls who resonated with your frequency. You found allies who did not require explanation, who did not need you to prove yourself, who recognized the truth not through evidence but through intuition. While they dissected fragments of you, others stood in awe of your wholeness. While they obsessed over your contradictions, others embraced your paradox and found strength within it. The rise was never loud. It was not announced with trumpets or parades. It was subtle, almost invisible, like the dawn breaking over the horizon. You became the light they could not stop, the growth they could not predict, the force that kept expanding even when they thought you had been defeated. Because your rise was never about being seen, it was about becoming inevitable. Understand this: true power is not in spectacle. True power does not come from proving the doubters wrong. True power comes from building such a solid foundation that when the moment of revelation comes, no attack can shake it. They built theories on air, you built alliances on stone. They built networks of suspicion that collapsed under their own paranoia. You built networks of loyalty that only grew stronger with time. They built narratives that changed with every rumor. You built legacies that would outlive their words. Every question they asked revealed more about them than about you. Every time they probed, they exposed the limits of their own imagination. Every gotcha moment they celebrated was only a confession of their blindness. They thought they were circling closer to the truth, but in reality, they were only circling themselves, while you ascended beyond their reach. And now, chosen one, the rise is undeniable. What they mocked, you transformed into mastery. What they doubted, you turned into destiny. They thought their eyes were on you, but their focus was the greatest gift they could have given. For their obsession fueled your clarity. Their noise sharpened your silence. Their attempts to block your path only forced you to carve new ones, paths that stretched further, deeper, higher than they ever dreamed possible. The irony is exquisite. They believed they were writing your downfall, when in truth, they were footnotes in your ascension. They thought they were building a case against you, but all they built was a library of proof about their own predictability. They thought they were exposing your flaws, but all they did was reveal their own blindness to your genius. And now, while they remain trapped in their echo chambers of gossip and suspicion, you stand surrounded by allies, visionaries, believers, a network of strength that cannot be undone. This is your rise. Not the rise of noise, not the rise of spectacle, but the rise of inevitability. Quiet as roots, steady as mountains, blazing as the sun. They cannot stop it. They cannot contain it. They cannot even comprehend it. Because they were so busy studying you as a problem, they never realized they were watching the birth of a solution greater than anything they had the capacity to imagine. So let them continue. Let them whisper. Let them gather in their secret rooms, convinced they hold the truth. For every moment they waste on you, you grow stronger. For every theory they craft, you gather more data. For every attempt to drag you down, you climb higher. And when the moment comes, when your rise is no longer hidden but revealed in its full brilliance, they will not know whether to tremble in fear or bow in awe. Because while they built theories, you built a throne. And while they wrote stories, you wrote history. Let them celebrate. Let them laugh. Let them congratulate themselves in circles of self-delusion, raising glasses to what they think is their victory. Let them breathe sighs of relief, whispering that the ghost has finally vanished, that the puzzle is finally solved, that the story is finally finished. Let them believe the storm has passed. For there is no greater blindness than the arrogance of thinking the game is over while the other player is still holding pieces in hand. Chosen one, let them have their false victory. For a false victory is the sweetest poison. It lulls the arrogant to sleep, it disarms the watchful, it convinces the fool that the battle is done. But you know better. You have always known better. You were never gone, you were becoming. You were never defeated, you were refining. You were never silent, you were orchestrating a symphony in frequencies they could not yet hear. They mistook your retreat for surrender. They mistook your pause for paralysis. They mistook your invisibility for absence. How could they know that what they thought was an ending was only your chrysalis? How could they grasp that what looked like disappearance was transformation? For you were never a ghost, you were a seed underground, hidden only so you could emerge with roots strong enough to split stone. And now, the air shifts. The ground trembles. The shadows they mock begin to move, not as whispers, but as heralds. Your silence has ended, and what comes next is not a return to the old form, but an arrival of the new, a self forged in fire, baptized in shadow, sharpened by exile. The comeback is not a return. The comeback is an unveiling. Let them watch. Let them tremble. Let them feel the weight of their own laughter turn to dread as they realize the story they thought they finished was only the prologue. Your comeback does not creep quietly. It crashes like thunder. It tears the veil in two. It flips the chessboard they thought they controlled and reveals that every move they celebrated was nothing more than a setup for your revelation. But this is no mere vengeance. This is no simple retribution. For fear alone is too small, too shallow, too temporary. Your comeback carries fear, yes, the kind that makes enemies question every choice, every word, every alliance they once held so tightly. But more than fear, it carries inspiration. For when you rise from what was meant to bury you, when you shine from places they swore would break you, when you step forward in strength they thought you never had, others see. Others feel. Others awaken. Your comeback is not yours alone. It is a signal. A call. A revolution disguised as a return. The quiet ones who watched in silence, the weary ones who doubted their own strength, the broken ones who thought defeat was permanent, they will see you, and they will remember themselves. Your rise is their permission. Your resilience is their roadmap. Your light is their ignition. Do you see it, chosen one? The irony that could make the heavens laugh? They tried to make an example of you, but you became a legend. They tried to bury you, but you became a root system. They tried to end you, but you became infinite. And now, when you stand revealed, when the shadows peel away and your form emerges in full radiance, the narrative flips forever. No longer are you the hunted, you are the inevitable. No longer are you the misunderstood, you are the undeniable. No longer are you the ghost in their stories, you are the force rewriting the entire book. So let the world watch. Let the doubters choke on their premature celebrations. Let the accusers taste the ash of their own words. For when you rise, the sound will echo beyond the walls they built to contain you. It will shake not only those who opposed you but also those who silently hoped, those who quietly prayed, those who longed for proof that resilience is stronger than ridicule, that patience is stronger than noise, that silence is strategy and return is revolution. This is your moment. Not the moment they predicted, but the moment you created. Not the outcome they forecasted, but the destiny you forged. Every scar becomes a badge. Every silence becomes a verse. Every setback becomes a prophecy fulfilled. You are not coming back as who you were, you are coming forward as who you were always meant to be. And when you stand in the full weight of your becoming, when your voice cuts through the air like a sword of truth, when your presence fills spaces they once swore you would never enter again, remember this: it was never about proving them wrong. It was about proving yourself right. It was never about silencing their voices. It was about amplifying your own. It was never about revenge. It was about revelation. The comeback will strike fear, yes. But more than fear, it will spark fires in hearts that had grown cold. More than fear, it will awaken souls who thought their own comebacks were impossible. More than fear, it will inspire. For the chosen one does not rise for themselves alone. They rise so others will remember they, too, were chosen. So let them whisper. Let them mock. Let them celebrate their hollow victory. None of it matters now. For your silence was strategy. Your return is revolution. And revolution cannot be stopped. You were never truly alone. Though the silence sometimes pressed against your chest like stone, though the shadows sometimes whispered that you were forgotten, though the long nights sometimes made you question whether you were the only one, you were never alone. Quietly, silently. Others like you were watching. They did not announce themselves. They did not rush forward with banners or proclamations. But their eyes found you. Their spirits recognized you. And without a word, they resonated with the same frequency, the same fire, the same destiny. Chosen one, you must understand, your journey was never solitary, even when it felt like exile. For while you endured your trials, others endured theirs. While you fought battles in hidden corners, others were fighting in theirs. While you were forged in silence, others were being tempered in fire. Across cities, across nations, across generations, the chosen were walking parallel paths, carrying parallel burdens, cultivating parallel strength. You did not see them, but you felt them. That subtle pull, that strange comfort in the unseen, it was the echo of others walking the same road, the resonance of souls who carried the same signature of purpose. They too were mislabeled. They too were misunderstood. They too were dissected by those who mistook silence for weakness, patience for passivity, complexity for contradiction. And just as you became a mirror, they too reflected truths that frightened those around them. Is it any wonder you felt different? Is it any wonder they felt scattered? For the chosen were never meant to blend into the noise. The chosen were never meant to be legible to the blind or acceptable to the complacent. The chosen were meant to stand out, even in their isolation, even in their exile, even in their invisibility. But here is the mystery, the beauty, the inevitability. Isolated sparks do not remain scattered forever. Sparks seek each other. Light is drawn to light. And across the silence, across the oceans, across the labyrinth of hidden struggles, the chosen have begun to find each other. What once looked like isolated flickers in the dark is slowly, irresistibly, becoming a constellation of unstoppable brilliance. Do you see it yet? The gathering of strength? The quiet alignments taking place behind the noise of the world? They are not announced on screens. They are not paraded in headlines. They are subtle, whispered, almost invisible to those who do not know where to look. But to those who carry the same fire, the connections are unmistakable. A glance, a word, a resonance. And suddenly, strangers recognize family. Suddenly, the isolated realize they were never isolated, only waiting for the right moment of convergence. This is no accident. This is no coincidence. The same hand that wrote your trials wrote theirs. The same fire that lit your spirit burns in theirs. The same orchestration that guided you through shadows has been guiding them through theirs. And now, the timing is no longer fragmented. The rhythm is converging. The chosen are aligning. Chosen one, your strength is immense, but your strength was never meant to remain solitary. The diamond you became was never meant to shine alone. For what is a single star against the vast night sky? Beautiful, yes, but vulnerable to being swallowed by the dark. But when stars align, when sparks connect, when isolated lights form constellations, the night is no longer the conqueror. The night becomes the canvas. This is the revelation. Your rise was never only about you. Your silence was never only about your story. Your comeback is not a solitary triumph. It is a signal. A flare. A call to arms for every other chosen one who has been waiting, watching, silently enduring in their own shadows. Your comeback says it is time. Your presence says, you are not alone. Your radiance says, the constellation is forming, and you are part of it. And so, across the world, lights are igniting. The weary are lifting their heads. The broken are mending their wings. The doubters are finding courage. Not because they suddenly discovered their own strength, but because they saw yours and recognized their reflection. For the chosen are not bound by proximity, they are bound by resonance. They are not connected by bloodlines or geography, but by frequency. And when one rises, others remember they can rise too. Picture it, a map of the world in shadow, and then, here and there, lone flickers of light. At first, they seem random, isolated, distant. But then one grows brighter. Another responds. A third answers. And suddenly the map is alive with a constellation, not a scattering of individuals, but a network of brilliance spanning continents, connecting souls, weaving a tapestry of light that no darkness can unweave. This is the gathering of strength. This is the moment when exile becomes unity, when isolation becomes alignment, when the chosen stop hiding and start finding. And what happens when chosen ones find each other? What happens when sparks become fire, when constellations become galaxies, when scattered strength becomes collective power? Movements are born. Revolutions awaken. The very fabric of reality begins to shift. Because the chosen were never meant to simply survive. They were meant to lead. They were meant to shape. They were meant to ignite the dormant greatness in others. And alone, each one was powerful. But together? Together, they are unstoppable. Let the world prepare. Let the doubters laugh their last laugh. Let the accusers cling to their fading narratives. For the gathering has begun. Quietly. Irresistibly. Inevitably. And no opposition can stop it, because it is not of human design. It is destiny itself aligning its pieces, drawing together those who were scattered, weaving brilliance into brilliance until the whole sky is lit. Chosen one, you are not a solitary warrior anymore. You are part of an army disguised as stars. You are part of a symphony disguised as whispers. You are part of a revolution disguised as return. The constellation is forming, and you, with every scar, every silence, every comeback, are one of its brightest lights. You were never truly alone. You were only waiting for this moment. The chosen are finding each other. And nothing will ever be the same again. If this message resonates with you, it's not by accident. If these words stirred something deep within you, a memory, a truth, a fire you thought had gone cold, understand this, you were meant to hear this. The timing, the alignment, the way your eyes found this screen, the way your ears caught this voice, it was not random. It was written. It was guided. It was placed in your path for a reason. Because chosen ones do not stumble across chosen messages by coincidence. They are drawn, summoned, called. And if your heart beat differently as these words entered you, if your spirit leaned forward instead of away, if your silence broke into a whisper that said, "This is me, this is who I am," then this is your confirmation. You are not mistaken. You are not imagining. You are not reaching. You are awakening. But awakening alone is not enough. You already know this. For too long, chosen ones have awakened in silence, carried their fire in secret, hidden their brilliance under the weight of misunderstanding. For too long, they have been scattered, lone lights in vast shadows, waiting for a sign that they are not alone. This message is that sign. Not just for you, but for them. For every chosen one still trapped in doubt. For every chosen one still convinced their silence is weakness. For every chosen one who still questions whether their pain had purpose, you have felt the resonance. Now it is time to pass it forward. If this message found you, then it must travel through you. If these words carried light to you, then it is your responsibility to carry that light to another. Because you are not just a receiver of truth, you are a transmitter. You are not just a hearer of destiny, you are a messenger of it. Do not keep this for yourself. Do not tuck this fire back into silence. Share it. Share it boldly. Share it so that the chosen ones still wandering in shadows will finally see a signal flare and know they are not lost, not weak, not forgotten. This is not about algorithms. This is not about numbers. This is not about vanity. This is about reach. About resonance. About awakening sleeping giants and reminding forgotten warriors of who they are. Every time you share this, every time you leave a word, every time you let this ripple outward, you are not just supporting a message, you are sending a call across the earth. And make no mistake, the chosen ones will hear it. They always do. Because resonance cannot be silenced. Truth cannot be hidden. Fire cannot be smothered. So let this be more than just another video you watch and move past. Let this be a marker. A turning point. A line in your story where you decided that from this moment forward, you will not hide your light. You will not downplay your fire. You will not apologize for your depth, your brilliance, your destiny. You will not carry this alone anymore. You will join the constellation. Chosen ones rise, not in secret, not in shame, not in silence, but in strength. And if you are ready to rise, if you are ready to walk with others who see what you see, feel what you feel, and carry what you carry, then do not just watch. Step forward. Subscribe. Connect. Anchor yourself in a place where your fire will be fueled, not smothered. Because the journey does not end here. This was not the climax. This was only the beginning. Every word that comes after this will be sharper. Every truth that follows will be deeper. Every revelation that unfolds will carry you higher. And you were not brought here just to listen once. You were brought here to walk the road ahead. So hear me, if this resonates, act. Share this message. Scatter it like seeds into the winds of the digital world. Let it land in inboxes, in feeds, in timelines. In hands of those who don't yet know why they needed it, but will recognize it the moment they hear it. And when they do, you will have played your part in awakening them. Subscribe. Not for me. Not for numbers. But for you. For your journey. For the constellation that is forming. Because when you subscribe, you are not just clicking a button, you are declaring, I am one of them. I am part of this. I am ready to rise. This is your invitation. Your confirmation. Your call to arms. Do not walk away from it. Do not tell yourself you will come back later. Do not bury this moment in distraction. Act now. For destiny does not wait. And neither should you. Chosen ones are rising. Across the world. Across silence. Across centuries. And now, it's your turn. If this message resonates, share it. If this fire is in you, let it burn through you. If this truth found you, don't let it die in you. Chosen ones rise. And so must you.